Hi, I'm David Novak, the former co-founder, chairman, and CEO of Yum Brands, which is Pizza Hut, Taco Bell, and KFC. And I'm also the author of a new book, Take Charge of You, How Self-Coaching Can Transform Your Life and Your Career. Today, on this podcast, I'm going to talk about three things that are very, very important. Number one, how your upbringing is so important. How growing up in 23 states by the time I was in 7th grade really shaped my leadership thinking. Number two, really understanding what it is in your life that gives you joy and blocks your joy, and then developing an action plan that will help you accomplish the single biggest thing that will give you the maximum out of your life. And last but not least, I want to talk about leadership and how you need to develop yourself by teaching other people. One of the best things you can do is teach other people everything you know about leadership, and then you will help grow your organization, and it's the most efficient and effective thing you could ever do. So get a teachable point of view and put it to work.
Congratulations! You are tuned into Dov Baron's Leadership and Loyalty Show, the #1 podcast for Fortune 500 executives and those who are dedicated to creating a quantum leap in leadership. Your host, Dov Baron, he's an executive mentor to leaders like you, a contributing writer for Entrepreneur Magazine, CEO World, and he's been featured on CNN, Fox, CBS, and many other notable sites. Dov Baron is an international business speaker who was named by Inc. magazine as one of the top 100 leadership speakers to hire. Now, over to Dov Baron.
Welcome, dear friends, fans, and fellow aficionados of leadership excellence. Thank you for joining us today on this episode of Leadership and Loyalty Tips for Executives. If you are a leader and you are any good, there's a pretty good chance that you've had at least one good coach to assist you on your path. The problem is that many coaches are less than premium, and I'm being nice there. As a result, finding someone who actually is good, who can really help guide you, can become quite a challenge. Now, listen, I'm fully in favor of you searching out the best of the best. But that being said, it's easy to tell somebody what to do, but do you know how to coach yourself so that you can successfully coach those you lead? Well, that's where we're going on the next couple of episodes, so stay tuned. As always, we need your help in staying relevant, so please get over to wherever you tune into the podcast and do us a favor, rate, review, and subscribe to the show. If you are a regular listener, big thank you to you for making us the #1 podcast globally for Fortune 500 listeners, and we are honored and grateful to be cited by Inc.com as the #1 podcast to make you a better leader. By the way, in case you're curious, I am Dov Baron. I'm your host, and I'm here to assist you tapping into the one thing in your business that changes everything by transforming meaning into actions. If you're curious to know more, simply go to dovbaron.com. That's DOVBARON.com. Now, our guest for the next two episodes is Mr. David Novak. David Novak is the co-founder, retired chairman, and CEO of Yum Brands, one of the world's largest restaurant companies, and with locations in more than 135 countries and territories. In his 17-year leadership, Yum Brands doubled in size, actually more than doubled in size, to over 45,000 restaurants, and grew from 4 billion to 32 billion market capital. He is the #1 New York Times bestselling author of Taking People With You, The Only Way to Make Big Things Happen. He's also the founder and CEO of David Novak Leadership, the parent organization of 5 nonprofit dedicated to developing leaders at every stage of life from age 5 to 65, a renowned expert on leadership and recognition culture. Among other things, he is the host of the top-ranked business podcast, How Leaders Lead with David Novak. His latest book is Take Charge of You, how self-coaching can transform your life and career, and it's just released for you to tune into, what to read right as you're tuning into this. So please put your hands together and help me to welcome the man recognized as CEO of the Year by Chief Executive Magazine, one of the world's top 30 best CEOs by Barron's, one of the top people in business by Fortune, and one of the top 100 best performing CEOs in the world by Harvard Business Review. Ladies and gentlemen, please put your hands together and help me to welcome Mr. David Novak.
Oh, thank you very much, Dov. I'm going to have to send this introduction to my mother for sure.
Well, I mean, how many times have you been introduced? And I mean, you're a big lad in the world you're in. This, and we always like, we always. I know for me, I'm speaking to. I know for me, it's always like, oh yes, listen, welcome. Come on, I've worked years to get to this. Get it up there. You deserve that, man.
Well, I think what's, you understand this is that, positive energy lifts everybody up. So you get that energy going. We're ready to go now. So I can't wait for this podcast. Yeah,
absolutely. Yeah. So David, where I always like to start is in the context of leadership development. What's the most frustrating thing to you that seems glaringly obvious, but is ignored or missed by others? It's, like I said, when I'm brought into a company, oftentimes I'm brought in to solve the problem that's not actually the problem. So from your point of view, what is the most frustrating thing that seems glaringly obvious that most leaders are either ignoring or dismissing?
Well, I think every leader, most leaders they're really focused on the result, but they don't really think about how you get that result. They'll say, I want to make a lot of money. Okay, well, how are you going to make money? To me, it comes back to the real formulas for success in business is that you've got to build your people capability first, then you satisfy more customers, and then you make money. And I think people are looking at the end goal without really thinking about how you get there. And so if your real focus is leadership development and people capability, that's how you're going to create the right kind of management that motivates people to really satisfy more customers and hence make more money. And I think people miss out on that simple fact.
Yeah, I think that so many leaders are focused on profit, and I think new leaders tend to be better at it, and profit, obviously, can't exist without it, but you've got to take care of your people first.
Yeah, absolutely. And profit's a good thing. Sure. I always say making money is a good idea. And your job as a leader is to grow your business so you can protect the jobs, grow the jobs, help people flourish in their careers. I just think that just way too often people are focused on the result that they want, okay, versus the means that you get there. And I don't know about you, Dov, but I've never seen people or any company be successful if they didn't have the right people in the right structure to really get the results you need to generate.
Absolutely. And, I want to bring this to a very topical thing because, as we're recording this, it's the first quarter or end of first quarter of 2022. There's still a very lot of conversation around the Great Resignation, right? This whole idea that people are not returning to work. And as I've spoken about from the platform as well as on interviews, people think that, when the pandemic hit, a lot of leaders thought, finally we'll have the power back. People can't wait to jump back in. And they're kind of shocked to discover that this global, and it is global, this people are just going, I'm not going back. And it's not just in North America. It's not just in Australia and England or first world English speaking countries. It's happening in places like Vietnam, and China, where people are just not returning. And I feel like so much of that is related to exactly what you just talked about, which is that companies have been doing a lot of the blah, blah, blah talk about looking after our people, but haven't done it.
Yeah. It's been quantified many times before, but there are two reasons why people leave companies or choose to resign. One is they don't get along with their boss. Okay. And the other is they don't feel appreciated for what they do.
Right.
And I think they're linked. That's why I really don't believe in the boss mentality. Bosses, that's 1950s. Okay. What you really want to have today is people want to work for coaches. Okay.
Yes.
And good coaches know that the most important thing you can do in the work environment that you're creating, the culture that you're creating, is you got to make sure that people know that they count, know that they matter at all levels of the organization. And that's why recognition is so important, because recognition really shows people that you appreciate them for what they do. I remember talking to Colin Powell, and once his summer jobs when he's a kid, he used to work at a Pepsi bottling plant. And this was back when I worked for Pepsi. But he said, he said his job was to mop the syrup floor, okay, and get that spick and span before he left. And he did it all summer long. And then, the last day, the boss came up to him and said, "Son, I've been watching you mop these floors all summer. You did a fantastic job." And Colin Powell says, that's when I really first learned the power of recognition. It shows that somebody's watching.
Yes.
And I think that's what recognition does. There's nothing worse than going to work every day, doing a really good job, and having people take it for granted and you for granted. And I think that's, something that has been an age-old problems. And I think what has happened now, and with the great resignation, is that, with COVID, all of us have had more time for self-reflection, introspection, figuring out, how happy am I? What am I achieving the potential that I have? And I think all of these things are making people say, hey, there just may be something better out there. And that's compounded when you're working for a boss who takes you for granted and doesn't help you feel appreciated.
I couldn't agree more. I mean, I've written a couple of pieces on this of late where I talk about the Great Resignation as not being what people think it is, but actually being a crisis in meaning, where people are actually going, before COVID happened, it was like, everybody was on that hamster wheel running so damn fast they weren't stopping. And they probably didn't go into lockdowns and those kinds of things with a lot of excitement about it, but it forced them to stop and pause and go, what is the meaning of my life? Why am I working here? My boss doesn't even know I exist, right? It's all not about me. It's about me being a machine and producing. And it's the interesting thing that you just said there, David, because recognition, I know you built everything at Yum Brands around the whole idea of a recognition culture. But there's the other side to it that I think that most leaders don't understand. If I have a recognition culture, it's doing exactly what you said earlier. It's letting people know we're watching. Yeah. So the other side of that is, I can't slack off. I can't be buggering around on Facebook. I better be doing my work.
Absolutely. And I think recognition works both ways. Number one, you want to recognize people are really getting things done.
Yes.
Number two, you want to recognize the bad behavior that's inconsistent with, what you stand for. And, there's nothing worse than working in an organization where people are able to slide by, not live the values, and still get paid. So
I think it sends a message to everybody else, doesn't it?
Yes, absolutely. And so I always think, people always said, David, you really like this recognition stuff. That's really soft, man. I thought it's the soft stuff that drives the hard results. Okay. And I never really believed that you should recognize people in some sort of willy-nilly way. For me, the big thing is you have to define in your business. You have to define what is it that makes your business tick. What are the behaviors you want to have your people exhibit that'll get the results that you want to have? Then you recognize the heck out of those behaviors so you see more of them.
Yes.
I've had engineers say to me, "Oh, David, this culture stuff's not going to work with me or my technology people or whatever." I said, well, what is it that you're looking for on your team that's going to drive results? Well, I want to have some innovative ideas. Okay. Well, that sounds good. Okay. Well, I want to get my jobs done on time. We have to be on time. I got to really listen to our constituency so that we really make sure that our projects are relevant and whatever. Anyway, I could go on and give you 4 or 5. Well, if those are the things that really drive your results, then recognize people every time you see it. Shout it from the rooftops, okay? And let people know why you're recognizing. And those behaviors, I guarantee you, they will happen more and more frequently when the leader really leads the way and touting that kind of performance.
Yeah, it's as Moshe Feldenkrais said, it's the elusive obvious.
Yeah,
It's so
absolutely.
obvious that like people are missing it all over the
Yeah,
shop.
there's another saying that I like. I give myself credit for coming up with, but I think other people actually did. Is that the problem with common sense? It's just not that common. And
Yeah.
I think that's a great point. So many of these insights on what really makes a leader, how a leader can impact other people. It's not like you're inventing something that's totally new, but
No.
it's crazy. Just people just don't do it.
Yeah, it is crazy. No, you obviously, being the CEO of Yum Brands, leading that company for 17 years, anybody in business knows that who that company is. They know that's a huge deal of an organization, all over the world. You led that, but you came from pretty humble background, pretty, and you and I talked previously, you lived in 23 states by the time you were 13 years old, and you lived in a trailer in each one of those. So you were quite literally trailer trash.
Well, I never really looked at it that way. In
But
fact,
I mean,
I,
that's a
I,
great
I, I
story.
no, no. In fact, when I've heard that phrase, that was always so hard for me to even fathom because if people go, "How could you grow up in a trailer? How could you move all these places?" And I tell everybody that I succeeded because of my upbringing, not in spite of it. Okay,
That's exactly what I wanted
because
to ask you. Thank you.
it was just an amazing experience. I traveled up and down the United States, never on the East Coast, never in the West Coast. I lived in small town America. I'm the only guy I know, that ever lived in Dodge City number one, but I actually lived in Dodge City twice, Dodge City, Kansas. So I lived in all these tiny little towns. And my mother would check me into the school stuff and say, David, you better make a friend because we're leaving. And, I had to really kind of go in and scope out the situation, get a sense of, who I wanted to hang with, uh, and really move quickly to make an impact because before long I was going to be taken off. And it was a great experience because I think I became a pretty quick study of people. My instincts on people, whether they're they're the right type or not, is pretty good. A lot of times people say, "How'd you know that?" Well, I don't know. I just it's sort of a gut instinct, and I think I picked up that gut instinct, through all those moves that I made.
Well, that's what I wanted to bring you to because I think that it's with my background in psychology, we could talk a lot about attachment theory and how attachment works. But what it is my personal belief that all curses have a blessing and all blessings have a curse, depending on what we do with them. And it's easy to, from an attachment point of view, to say, living in all those different places for the first 13 years of your life doesn't allow you to get attached to anybody, doesn't allow you to have any lasting bonds with people. But it also teaches you the skills of, as you said, very quick assessment, very like learning how to assess people quickly and finding out who actually you can connect with. How do you think that really impacted the way that you saw how to hire and how to recognize, for that matter?
Well, I have to go back to my mom and dad. My mom and dad had high school educations. My mom and dad, both of them, I'm convinced, could run a company if they had the same opportunities, the same coaches that I had, and they had the education. They had it. So for me, you know, there was never a time where I went into a restaurant, for example, and I'm meeting the team members and meeting the restaurant managers that I didn't see my mom and dad out there somehow. And and I knew I could see sometimes they just get up on their haunches and they start talking about what we should be doing to grow the business and all this. And I go, that's my mom and dad would be exactly like that because they are smart, they're committed, they're passionate. So when I thought about hiring people, I never ever would hire anybody that I didn't see themselves being able to function, not only in the boardroom, but also on the front line.
Mhm.
I was very focused and still am very focused on the power of the front line and the power of treating everyone with respect. You know, every job has dignity.
Yes.
And if, I studied the great cultures just as you have, and the number one characteristic of the highest performing companies that get results year after year after year is that they create a culture where everyone counts. So I wanted to hire people that had that mindset, had that mentality of that everyone counts. That they might have gone to Harvard, but they didn't think they were better than anybody else.
Yes.
But if you went to Harvard and you thought you're better than someone else, I would say go work at some other company and make other people miserable, but you're not going to make ours miserable.
I love that. I actually love what you just said around that every job has dignity. I have my life's purpose. I have a long range mission in my own personal life, and it's called the Dignity Foundation. And it's understanding that if we are going to make a difference in the world, we have to understand that everybody deserves dignity. Everybody. I've mentioned this before. I'm outside of my office. There's a guy who sits there. He's a homeless guy. And I would sit outside my office, my consulting office, and a client would come in and I'd say, "Did you see the guy outside the office?" And they go, "Yeah." And I go, "What do you know about him?" And they go, "Homeless, I guess." I said, "Do you know anything else?" "No." "Why not?" "Did you go in the coffee shop on your way in? You've got coffee in your hand." "Yep." "Who served you?" "A young girl." "What's her name?" "I don't know." "Why don't you know those people?" "What do you mean? Why haven't you bothered to take 2 minutes out of them?" I said, "Before you show up for the next appointment, I want to know the name of the person who served you in the coffee shop, where they're from, and I want you to find out whatever you can about the person outside of the front door." And they go, "Well, do you know?" I go, "Absolutely, I know." And
Yeah.
I did know. I knew his name was John. I knew he had leukemia. I knew he worked. He didn't have any fancy job, but he was a hardworking guy who got taken out by leukemia and was never able to come back and can't survive on welfare. Okay. So, and by the way, when I pull up my car to park there, I don't have to put money in the meter. John puts the money in the meter for me and he watches the meter. And when I come out, he tells me how much he's put in and I give it to him. And of course, I always give him more, right? That's dignity, honoring
Right.
somebody as a human being. We don't even give them a look of our eyes. We make them invisible. And how many times is a leader doing that as they pass through the front line, looking to get to the boardroom and ignoring everybody else? So I love that that's not only your, um, the way that you've operated in the company, but your philosophy of life. So thank
Yeah.
you for that. I
Yeah.
want to
Well,
recognize
thank you
that.
for your comments, and you're right on. And I guarantee you, John knows that you care about him. Okay. And that I love that phrase, no one will care about you unless you know that you care about them. And,
Absolutely.
I think what our country needs, what the world needs is more people caring about each other and taking the time to give people that respect that they deserve. Um, and I do think that the background that I had really, really taught me that because, I came up with people who were hardworking Americans that really basically wanted to give their children the American dream. And
Mhm.
there was a belief that you could achieve that,
Yeah.
and everybody on our remember that surveying party. My dad was a surveyor. They wanted their kids to go to college so they'd have more of an opportunity than they had. And that kind of passion for your kids and belief in your kids and seeking opportunity for your kids. I think that's something that you don't always find. And I found my surveying party that we were on, the people were really, really loving and caring. When I played Little League Baseball, Dove, the whole surveying party come out and watch my games. So I actually had more support than
Yes.
than you could ever imagine, more than you would have if you were growing up in a big city in a really nice neighborhood, because people stuck together and hung together and helped each other out.
But when I teach people about culture, one of the things I say is that culture, we can talk about culture in all kinds of check the boxes kinds of ways, but the truth of the matter is a good culture is a community. It's where we have each other's back, where we're going to cover for each other. We're going to help each other. The kid's got to go to the hospital. Okay, well, I'll cover you. I'll cover for you. I can cover for you while you do that. I'm not covering up for you. I'm going to cover for you. I'm going to make sure you're okay. And by the way, call me if you need it. Here's my private number. That community feel, and it's really sounds like you got that in that environment.
I never really liked the word culture because it sounds too much like a germ. It's like, what are we really talking about here? I mean, what we're really talking about is how things get done on your team, how things get done in your company. That's really what the culture is. And what you want to do is create a working environment which brings out the best in other people. And, if you can do that, that's when you really get the magic of collaboration, the magic of teamwork, the magic of customer focus, all the things that really make businesses tick.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. We're already coming towards the end of the first part of the two-part series here. And I want to make sure that, in the second half, we're going to talk a lot about this self-coaching and what is self-coaching, but also what coaching is it in general, because I think there's a lot of misconceptions about that. I get irritated by, it's my bias, by the way, so I own it, but people go, oh, I'm a coach. And I'm like, okay. It's like one of those things that it's the new shingle to hang out. And I want to talk about what it means to coach yourself and what it means to be a good coach in the second part of the show. And I want to see if there's some places that you really learned that in that very different background you had than the world you came to live in as a global CEO. So this has been a fabulous part one, and I really want to thank you. Thank you for you're really learning and applying your instinct at a leadership level, which is really wonderful. We're going to be back for part two of the show. And if you want to find out more, you can we'll make sure that the notes are posted, all the links are posted. But before we do that, David, would you please tell people where they can find out more about you and all the wonderful resources that you offer, including your podcast and your books, etc.?
Well, you can go to davidnovakleadership.com, and that's where you can learn about the leadership programs that we have. And then for aspiring leaders that I'm sure are listening to this show right now, you go to howleaderslead.com. And you'll learn, you can see the podcast that I do and enjoy doing. We have digital programs and books that are offered up. So, I think, one of the exciting things, Dov, is and I love what you do. Okay. What
Thank
you're
you.
doing is you're trying to make the world a better place by developing better leaders. And you and I are so aligned. It's unbelievable. So
Thank you, sir.
that's where I hope if you go to my website, you can get some good ideas on how to get that done.
Fabulous. Okay, so we'll be back in just one click. Till then, stay curious, my friend. Stay curious about how you can coach yourself into higher levels, not only of leadership, but of being a better human being and adding dignity to the world. We'll be back in one click. Stay tuned and stay curious.